I am Tom Donelson. I am sitting in for Joe Mangiacotti here on WCRN 8:30 a.m. on your listening dial. The call-in line, if you want to call in, is 508-871-7000, 508-871-7000. Your text line is 617-297-8388. And I will also I say I will be having a guest, and I'm assuming is I'm now looking for.
Your
Let's
guest is
see.
on the line.
Okay, Steve, how are you there?
I'm good. Hey, Tom, thanks for having me. There was a little confusion over whether I was hosting or guesting, so I wasn't sure what
Yeah.
I was supposed to do, but I'm happy to be your guest.
All right, sounds good. Yeah, no, a little confusion here, but we're here. First of all, I want to introduce Steve Gill. Steve Gill has a BA in history and a BA in law from the University of Tennessee. He's obtained a JD in history from the University of Tennessee College of Law. You were also appointed to be a White House Fellowship in Intergovernmental Affairs. You have run for Congress. You've been a radio talk show host, and you're basically listed as one of the Business Tennessee Magazine 100 most powerful person. So, is there anything else that I missed?
I think that pretty much lays the groundwork. I've done media and television and radio for the last 30 years, and I still do political, business, international affairs commentary for stations, both radio and TV across the U.S. and internationally. I do about 6 or 8 hits a week in places like Azerbaijan, Istanbul, Cairo, London, Moscow, Dubai, Doha. So I'm a regular on the international scale. I kid people, Tom. I say, yeah, I actually appear on Iranian TV a few times, and they've got about 800,000 viewers now. 700,998 want me dead, but I do have a lot of viewers. So that's a count for something, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. Well, here's the thing. First of all, I got one quick question. Do you know Glenn Reynolds at all?
I do, man. He is amazing. A law professor at the University of Tennessee.
Yes.
Instapundit is a go-to for people that are listening. If you're not already going to Instapundit every day to get your quick hit, not just on the news, but really cool products that he promotes, you're missing out. Glenn Reynolds is amazing.
Yeah, actually, it's one of the best sites out there. In fact, if not one, it's one of the top 4 or 5. All right, I brought you in for several, conversations here. And again, anybody wants to join in with the questions, you can call 508-871-7000. This is Tom Donelson filling in for Joe Mangiacotti on the Joe Mangiacotti Show. And so what I'm going to start off with, since so you have some you've been talking about international for a long time. The question I'm going to ask you: how so far, how did Trump pull this thing off in your mind? What did he do?
A word that we haven't heard as much in recent years is gravitas. I mean, remember when you had President Bush and Dick Cheney, they were looking for the right VP for President Bush. And Dick Cheney was the one that was dubbed to have gravitas, had the credibility, had the strength to be the VP that Bush needed. And I think that's what Trump brings to the table. I mean, particularly after sort of in my view, soft leadership that Barack Obama brought to the White House, the inept leadership that we saw from Joe Biden. You got, daddy's home, and he's striding on the national stage. The other world leaders, show him the respect that he and the nation is due when you have a strong leader. And I think he is the only guy who could have brought these disparate interests and thoughts together, because they know he doesn't play. And I think Iran learned that when they kept trying to push the edge of the envelope. I think others have learned that he's going to step in, and whether it's on international trade issues, whether it's on these conflicts that have bubbled up around the world, whether it's dealing with Congress and Chuck Schumer and the Democrats. He's a main player. He has the gravitas, the credibility, and I think with a lot of the world leaders, if not a trust factor, at least a fear factor that means they don't want to cross him. And now you're seeing even some within the European community, like Meloni in Italy, saying, look, I'm going to break with the EU. I'm going to strike my own trade deal with Donald Trump, which could spell the end of the EU as countries start saying, wait a minute, we'll strike our own deal with Trump. Like, you had Brexit with the UK leaving. I think you could see the EU fall apart in part because they know they can deal better with Trump individually than they can collectively.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, that's a good point because here's a thought. I mean, you're absolutely right, and you're absolutely right in that particular point. In the gravitas side of the equation, and I think this is in many ways is a much different Trump from the first administration because the gravitas he has now he did not have in that first administration. But I think you're seeing much more so. You're seeing a guy. Okay, here's my game plan, and I'm going to appoint people who are going to help me put that game plan together. And let me throw out a thought.
That's the biggest difference, man. You are right on the point. In his first term, he came in thinking, look, I'm not going to fill a lot of these slots that are senior. I'm going to fill my cabinet, and it took a while for that to happen. But then I'm not going to appoint the deputy assistant, the assistant secretary. We're going to save money because I'm not going to fill those slots. And I actually worked as head of intergovernmental affairs for the U.S. Trade Representative, as you mentioned, as a White House fellow over first Bush to the first 6 months of Bill Clinton. And what happens is if you don't fill those void of political appointees, the career bureaucrats take those spots, fill those roles until you appoint the senior officials. And what Trump didn't recognize is those career bureaucrats were not going to pursue his agenda. They were going to pull the rug out from under his agenda. And then he appointed people that would be, termed in many cases Republicans in name only, moderates, that were also not behind the Trump agenda in his White House at senior positions. So his team was not all pulling in the same direction in the first 4 years. This time, they are Trumpers. They are MAGA advocates, and they are following it straight ahead and following his policies, not kind of going out on their own.
Yeah. I'm going to tell you what there's one thought I want you to think about here because we're coming up on a break in about a minute. But the one thought that came to my mind, I heard this, with Putin, escalate to de-escalate when Putin was doing all his threats. And I always thought, to me, what I saw Trump do was exactly that. He escalated in Iran, and then he de-escalated to get the peace. I want, when we come back from our break, I want you to kind of follow up on that theme.
1 minute.
Follow up on that theme. And ladies and gentlemen, this is Tom Donelson filling in for Joe Mangiacotti. After the break, if you want to call and get in the line to talk with Steve Gill, 508-871-7508-871-7000. This is Tom Donelson on WCRN 830 Radio Central, Boston's 50,000 watts radio station. And we should be right back very quickly here on the other side when Steve Gill will answer the question, escalate to de-escalate.
10 more seconds.
And
8:30 a.m. on your listening dial.
508-871-7000.
508-871-7000.
When you're planning your wedding or special event, make sure you and your guests arrive safely and on time. Choose the best. AA Transportation has over 600 vehicles and a team of licensed professional drivers, making them the largest transportation company in Central Mass. AA Transportation delivers world-class service with a personal touch, ensuring the transportation of your wedding or special event goes perfectly. AA Limousine Services can transport wedding parties up to 14 people in our luxurious stretch Cadillac Escalade limos. We provide guest shuttles up to 55 passengers in our activity coaches or buses, so your guests get home safely after celebrating your special day. For custom wedding or event transportation, call AA Limousine Services, 508-791-9100, 508-791-9100, or visit us online at aatransportation.com.
Are you tired of the Orwellian speech that
1
hypocrisy
minute.
rampant throughout government and within the Beltway? I'm reminding you, talk
Okay.
radio is the immune system to the partisan bias, political rhetoric attacking us on a daily basis. Get inoculated. Tune in to Joe Mangiacotti on WCRN 830 AM, where common sense meets common ground. Joe is the conservative voice with a twist, blending a constitutionalist respect for our founding principles with a libertarian's drive for freedom. He's got a unique style that's half constitutionalist, half common sense, and all about empowering you. Just listen to his callers.
Joe, I have to tell you, first,
30
I've listened to you a
seconds.
couple of times on your own show here, and I have to tell you, I enjoy listening to you. You have some really good, intelligent, cogent thoughts rather than just the constant monologue of conservative talk that sometimes we get wound up in.
Joe's even-tempered, intelligent approach cuts through the clutter and dives into the issues that matter to you. Join Joe Mangiacotti for Common Sense Conversation for the Common Sense Citizen and discover how logic, truth, and a calm voice can change minds, even those who might disagree at first. It's not just talk, it's a movement. Catch Joe Mangiacotti, WCRN 830 AM.
Mike is live.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, back to the Joe Mangiacotti Show. I am Tom Donelson. I'm filling in. If you want to call in, you call in at 508-871-7000. If you just want to be shy and just simply text, go 617-297-8388. This is Tom Donelson here on WCRN, substituting for Joe Mangiacotti, the Common Sense Conservative. And we're here with Steve Gill. And Steve, okay, we left with the question, escalate to de-escalate. What is, again, I thought this is, in my view, was one of a factor that led to what we're doing right now. What are your thoughts?
That works if you're dealing with, second and third tier countries. When you're dealing with Hamas, when you're dealing with Hezbollah, these kinds of organizations, escalating, threatening, taking them out to make sure they come to the conference table and negotiate. When you're dealing with Iran, you can escalate to de-escalate. The problem, I think, now, though, is President Trump is getting incredibly bad advice from people like General Clark Kellogg, from people like Mark Rutte, the Secretary General of NATO, who famously said just a few months ago, with respect to the Ukraine-Russia conflict, Ukraine is winning, but the battlefield and the front lines are moving in the wrong direction. There has never been a more inane, idiotic statement of a so-called world leader than that. Oh yeah, Ukraine's winning, but the front lines are moving in the wrong direction. That means you're losing. And the fact that President Trump is listening to the warmongers in Europe, rather than realizing that Ukraine has lost this conflict, cannot win this conflict. And now we had Pete Hegseth yesterday saying, "Oh look, we're going to sell the weapons to the Europeans, the Western Europeans, and they're going to give them to Ukraine." The problem with that is the Western Europeans, most of them have not paid their share to NATO. Their economies are in free fall. They cannot pay us for the weapons. We want to sell them. So I hope we're getting paid cash up front. Tom, it's kind of like if you're a criminal defense lawyer, you get paid before your guy goes to trial, because after the trial, he may not be there to pay you. Western Europe can't pay us for the weapons that we've been giving, and now we're presumably selling. And then the worst thing is many of his top advisors, and I'll throw General Jack Keane, who you see on Fox all the time. He used to be wearing the Ukraine pin. He stopped doing that. But General Jack Keane's institute, his nonprofit, like so many of these guys, is funded by the military-industrial complex. They have a financial interest in continuing war. General Jack Keane is the chairman and CEO of a company that makes and sells military Humvees. He has a financial interest in continuing the war.
Okay, I'm going to stop here. I'm going to stop.
That's crazy.
Here's the thing. I'm going to stop because here's the thing. I'm going to kind of throw on this way, because I personally, I think, again, obviously we're not talking in the case of the Ukraine. I think Putin himself made a very miscalculation in this regard. And that is, had he my understanding is he basically could have gotten what he wanted. He could have gotten pretty much where he is right now. there was no desire on either the Trump or the administration to put Ukraine into NATO. And essentially, he was going to basically tell the European, this is your backyard. And I think that, to me, the one thing that Putin underestimated is that for Trump, that would have been a victory. That would have been, okay, Ukraine is there. We did what we do. We got the truce. We can move on and let the Europeans handle this in their own way. And by basically challenging, by basically not agreeing to that. Because one thing about Trump, he doesn't want to be labeled a loser. That to me is the key element. It's not so much the advice. It's a much that he doesn't want to be the guy who loses Ukraine, as opposed to we have a peace that basically saves what's left of Ukraine and move on from there. And that's what he would have called a victory. And I sometimes, that's the one thing to me I've always noticed with Trump. He doesn't want to be.
Putin had agreed to that. He had that victory. Putin agreed with that. It is the EU and NATO and Zelensky who continue to say, we are going to take back all of eastern Ukraine, Donetsk, Luhansk, Mariupol. We're going to put Ukraine into NATO. If they don't intend to do it, Tom, why do they keep saying it? If they don't intend to try to rearm, resupply, and retake eastern Ukraine, then shut up. Cut the deal that President Trump and Putin presumably agreed on. Zelensky, the UK, France, and Germany blew the deal.
Well, I guess to me, I say in the end, Trump's, in the end, I think Trump is going to end up getting exactly that down the road. I think what we're seeing is kind of like after, we're seeing that, what I call the dance. The dance that they do, but in the end, we're going to get what they get, because all Trump has to say is, "Okay, this is it, guys. You do it if we're out of here." But I just think, there's a part of me that I must just
put up money. But then here's the danger point. He keeps talking about sending Tomahawk missiles. You've got Kellogg saying we're going to send Tomahawk missiles. Tomahawk missiles are tipped in many cases with nuclear weapons, and the Russians have said properly, when we see a Tomahawk from Ukraine headed our way, we are assuming it is tipped with a nuclear weapon, and we are firing ours before they hit. So if you're giving Tomahawks to Ukraine, then you are provoking World War III, and I don't think Donald Trump wins the Nobel Prize if he provokes World War III by giving Tomahawk missiles to the nutcase Zelensky in Ukraine.
Well, let me put it this way. I just heard today that Peter has basically said there'd be no Tomahawks with these weapons that they're selling. So it'll be interesting to see, I think, whether or not wisdom comes into play.
Kellogg stopped going on national news saying they're going to give them to them. Again, this is the bad advice and the inconsistent advice Trump is getting. Clark Kellogg is going out there saying, we're going to do this. Well, or General Kellogg is saying, then tell him to shut up and fire him.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's go back to the EU. I mean, I know we were talking about the Middle East, but we'll get back to the Middle East. But you made up an interesting point in the Middle East, and you make some strong points here on the show. By the way, anybody wants to comment on this, 508-871-7000. Get in line to call here on the Joe Mangiacotti Show, WCRN 830 AM on your listening dial. All right. Is the EU the biggest obstacle to prosperity in Europe?
They're the biggest obstacle to their own prosperity. I mean, when you watch the UK, their economy is collapsing because the illegal immigrants continue to flood in. You're seeing Nigel Farage move his Reform Party up the dial in terms of support. Keir Starmer is hanging on for his dear life. The only thing saving him is that under British law right now, they don't have to call an election for another 3 or 4 years unless King Charles dissolves the parliament. So he's going to hang on, because if they have an election, they lose badly. In France, you have Macron replacing presidents and then replacing the president with the president he just fired. Their economy is in free fall. In Germany, the populist conservative AfD is on the rise, and Germany is having to deindustrialize because they don't have the power resources, the energy resources to keep their big automotive plants and other industrial facilities alive. The ones that have figured it out, as I think I mentioned earlier, is Italy and Prime Minister Meloni He's figured out, I'm going to cut my own trade deal with President Trump because, among other things, he's figured out that the way to work with Trump is to have a personal relationship with Trump. And those that get along with Trump personally, whether it's Modi in India, whether it's Putin to some extent, whether it's those around the world, those that get along with Trump are going to fare better than those who try to challenge him. By the way, I thought the highlight of the Middle East meeting, Tom, was when you had Carney after the meeting tell President Trump, hey, you mentioned me being president of Canada. I'm the prime minister. And Trump said, well, at least I didn't call you governor. I mean, this is the funniest guy we have ever had in the White House.
I know.
You have to just take it.
Well, okay, I'm gonna because here's the thing. I've written 2 books on, and I've always dealt with the EU as more of a threat, not just to the prosperity of Europe, but the elites of the EU basically don't like the United States. At least they don't like Trump. They prefer a Joe Biden type that they can rule.
Absolutely.
And the thing is, between the bureaucracy, the zero net that they basically are trying to impose on the rest of us, and I think, quite frankly, I kind of like the idea that what you're saying is, Maloney, the Italian prime minister, she's figured this out. The Poles have figured this out. The Polish people have figured this out.
Yes.
They basically have ignored on the immigration.
Orban in Hungary. I mean, you look at the countries that are getting along with Trump, they're much more like Trump in terms of the populist conservative leadership that they are bringing to bear. And let's not forget that the distance. I mean, President Trump revered Queen Elizabeth. He is fond of the British crown. He is fond of King Charles. But Keir Starmer and his senior leadership dispatched people to the U.S. to work against Trump in the campaign. Trump doesn't forget stuff like that.
No, he doesn't. But here's this is, to me, a very interesting, because if you look at France, for example, and you look at France as a good example. In most of the political parties that existed, the Gaullist Party, the Socialist Party, they're pretty well gone. They're gone. They've disappeared. They've collapsed. And now you're going to see the centrist party, Macron, collapse. And if you go in Great Britain, I just personally think the Reform Party is going to overtake the Conservative Party, and the Conservative Party's only chance of survival is basically they're going to have to unite with the Reform Party, or they're going to be dead in the water as well. Your thoughts? You got
100%. I agree 100%. And again, they need to either embrace reform or they will go away. And I think you're seeing the question of whether or not they will coalesce with
1 minute
and have a majority party or not. By the way, you mentioned France. If Marine Le Pen makes it on the ballot, she will be running France, and France can turn around and be on the path to prosperity and better relationships with Donald Trump and their fellow European leaders.
All right. This is Tom Donelson here. We are we're going to be taking a quick break with Steve Gill. If you want to basically call in this show, you go basically
30 seconds.
508-871-7000, 508-871-7000. We're going to, after the break, we're going to continue to follow up both on Europe and on the Middle East. If you want to call in and ask questions. And by the way, Steve Gill is very skilled at talking about a lot of different issues. So
10 seconds.
So we'll be right back here. 508-871-7000, 508-871-7000. Call in number and WCRN 830 AM on your listening dial.
Time now for the forecast from the Boston Independence Group Weather Center. Call Jerry Doherty today at 877-772-1776. Retirement is within reach.
I'm meteorologist Sherry Spearn. Here's the latest Boston 25 weather on Radio 830 WCRN. Partly cloudy skies for today with highs in the lower 60s. Tonight we're going to drop back into the 30s and 40s under mostly clear conditions. There will be a breeze today and tomorrow. In fact, a little stronger for your Thursday plan. So heads up, tomorrow is actually the coolest and the windiest day of the week. Dry weather continues. I'm meteorologist Sherry Spearn. You can hear Boston 25 live for the morning drive weekdays on AM 830 WCRN.
More live and local radio is next. Stay tuned to Radio Central, 830 WCRN.
Join us at the corner of fresh and familiar. North Star Music, New England hits that made radio great. Evenings at 8 on Radio Central WCRN.
Supplements are a tricky business. Some are made in China and other countries with poor quality control. Many supplements contain fillers and dyes that may actually harm you. Many ingredients are not bioavailable and can't be used efficiently by your body. Let Phil George, the biochemist from Wellness Wave Radio, help you navigate these minefields. Just contact Phil at philgeorge@charter.net for a free consult.
The best Italian cuisine served by some of the nicest
30
folks you'll ever meet is at Ziti's Italian Trattoria. It's fine Italian cooking at the Speedway Shopping Center, 290 Turnpike Road in Westboro. It's like sitting down with your family for an authentic home-cooked Italian meal. From intimate dinners to catering for events of all sizes. From pizzas and calzones to classic Italian dinners. Every meal at Ziti's is one you'll remember. Head on down to Ziti's, 290 Turnpike Road in Westboro.
Your mics are live.
This is Tom Donelson back, replacing Joe Mangiacotti, who's out for today, but don't worry, he'll be back for the next show. Call-in number is 508-871-7000. My guest is Steve Gill, a man who knows quite a bit about a lot of things. He did work as a fellow in the first Bush administration, has been a commentator on many different issues. And so, again, the 508-871-7000. And I think, do we have a caller? Ken, are you on the line?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am, Tom.
Hey, Ken.
Okay. Go ahead, Ken. Go ahead. Ask your question, or do you have a comment? Go ahead.
No, I have a question for you and Steve. Where does violence surge more, UK or US?
Okay. What do you? Oh, the violence. You mean political violence?
Well, UK, you have they're just clamping down on speech. So anyone dares say anything that doesn't conform, that eventually leads to violence. And then the U.S., you have the whole Democratic Party who's gone wild. Yeah. And I think there's going to be death this weekend. And No Kings Part 2.
Yeah. Okay, Steve, what's your thoughts?
Well, they're certainly trying to inspire it, Ken. You're exactly right. And I'm not sure which is worse, the fact that the Democrats seem to be absolutely intent on provoking violence or provoking vomit in the back of our mouths with nude bicycle riding protests in Portland. America does not deserve that. And when they start serving that up, we should all be repulsed. I do think that in the UK, the fact that they are being so anti their own citizenry, when they prosecute Brits for complaining about the rape of their daughters and sisters and mothers, they get jailed. But the illegal immigrants who've come in who are raping and murdering and pillaging, they get a free pass. And I think the UK is very close to an economic and revolutionary revolt within. If they were as armed as Americans are, I think they would already be there. When they're limited to knives and hatchets, I think they have limits. But I think the Democrats here are definitely intending this weekend to provoke violence with their No Kings rally. And I think that Republicans need to be very calm. I think the police in these cities need to be very restrained because they are trying to provoke something that will allow them to ratchet it up. And as Tom was mentioning earlier, they want to escalate, but they don't want to de-escalate.
Yeah, I get this. I want to add on to this. The difference between the United States and Great Britain is, first of all, number one, we were able to elect Donald Trump. And so that does aid us in the respect. And two, it's self-evident where the violence is coming from. It's coming from the left. I agree with Steve. I do think down the road I don't know if it's going to be this weekend, but I think eventually blood's going to be shed. In fact, blood's already been shed. I mean, Charlie Kirk has already been assassinated. So it's not like it hasn't been done already. But I do think that in a way, it's more or less limited to blue cities and blue states. in Great Britain, I think it's going to be much more of a broad-based revolution when the economy continues its downward cycle. And I guess, and when I think there's going to be enough people who have said enough is enough. And I think that you're going to have a much more broader escalation of violence in Great Britain, mainly because you have a government that's openly hostile to the very people that they serve. So that's going to, so I guess if the question you ask it, I think Great Britain is in more serious trouble. I think we'll see violence in the United States, but I think that it's going to be tempered by the fact that it's going to be limited to maybe selected areas that the Democrats already control. Ken, what's your thoughts?
Well, I think the blue areas are just, they want desperately to be violent. And they don't get it. There's no part of L in losing that they accept. They just get more violent every time they lose.
Yeah.
So
what? Yeah.
I don't know what the breaking point where, but because literally you're going to have some leader, a group of leaders on the left say, that's it. It has to end now, and insist it ends now.
Yeah.
On their side.
Well, and I think the biggest problem, you just nailed it, you hit the leadership, because here's the bottom, other than John Fetterman in the United States, he's about the only leading Democrat that I can say right now that is basically willing to put his own political on the line. And make no mistakes, right now, there are a lot of Democrats in his own state of Pennsylvania that are probably regretting that they voted for him. And so so right now he's in that step, but And I think maybe in the long run, and I'm going to ask this, Steve, is this. To me, the one thing that needs to be done is the people have to, the American people have to make a decision. Do you really want to put up with this nonsense? Because we have one weapon. When you go into 2026, first of all, we can begin in 2025 in Virginia by simply sending a message to the Democrats. Hey, if you're going to support a guy who wants to kill his political opponents, that's on you. But the people can make it clear to the Democrats, we're not going to put up with that kind of violence, that kind of rhetoric, that kind of nonsense. And if in 2026, if we basically clean the slack, keep the House, keep the Senate, do it in a in a definite way that leaves no doubt, I think you're going to see some Democrats decide maybe the time has come. I don't know. All right. Or maybe it could be, and Steve, I'm going to ask this because I wrote a book called America, the Abyss, Will Americans Survive? And before that, I wrote the book, The Rise of National Populism and Democratic Socialism. And I made the point then, the Democratic Party is essentially the Socialist Party of America. They may not necessarily call themselves socialist, but they are the Socialist Party. The only real debate left is how we will define populism from this force. Which way do we go? Do we follow the Trump?
You may need to do an update on your book and question whether they have moved, as we look at Mamdani in New York City, have they moved from socialist to communist, with just one kind of smooth move. I run a statewide publication in Tennessee online that I encourage people to go check. TriStarDaily.com, TriStarDaily.com. And I just put up a piece that kind of fits this perfectly, Tom, in that the Democratic Party base and voice are the AOCs and the Jasmine Crockett's and the Mamdanis and the Squad. They have abandoned any reach of common sense and commonality with the American people. I mean, their issues are, we want boys and girls locker rooms. We want transgender surgeries for 6-year-olds. We want to support violence in our streets rather than let Trump and law enforcement return security to our communities. They're taking the wrong end of every 80, 20, 90, 10 issue, and the voice and face of their party are these extreme radical nitwits like AOC, which is why Schumer and any other Democrat, they're so terrified of primaries that they can't even react what their party has become. And their party has become so far out of the mainstream, they can't even see water from where they are. So I think that the challenge for them is, how do they even get back towards the middle when they're so terrified of their far left radicals?
Yeah. That's going to be good. Yeah, yeah. Here's the interesting thing about that is that you look in the some of the senatorial election, North Carolina. You got Roy Cooper. Now, Roy Cooper, basically was hamstrung by a Republican majority in both houses, so he was not able to do too many crazy things. The same thing with Andy Beshear out of Kentucky. You certainly would have the Georgia election. We had John Ossoff. I mean, these are people running in states that, quite frankly, are, I'm going to use the word not red, but light red. And the question is going to be is how far left will they have the guts to say, you know what, I can't run like this and win. I have to, move more to the center. And
but they have
whether
to
or
move
not
that far left to win their primaries. They can't win their primaries unless they go whack job.
Yeah, but I mean, here's the
far enough back that anybody believes them when they then claim to be moderate.
Yeah, I guess the question would be, the difference with in those two states, both Cooper and that's why they're already established. It'd be very tough to remove them. Now they could have a divisive primary if they choose to go a little bit to the center, but it's gonna be kind of, I think they have a little leeway that maybe, let's say, somebody in Michigan wouldn't have, in that particular primary, going to begin Mike Rogers. That's just my view. Maybe I know you've been a political observer for quite a while. What's your thoughts? They have some leeway, or do you think that they are so scared of the left that regardless how favored they would be to win their primary, they will still move?
They have to watch their flank, but I think you're exactly right. They're established enough as a quote moderate in the eyes of the voters in their state that they can wait to win and then align themselves with the whack job left. The problem is we should not believe that they won't align with the whack job left because they're not condemning it. And as you point out, when you've got the attorney general candidate in Virginia voicing murder of the Speaker of the House there, Democrats defend it and don't condemn him, saying, well, those are just words. We have seen words turn to action, whether it was the murder of Charlie Kirk, the assassination attempts of President Trump, the violent protests on the streets of Supreme Court justices' houses. They have turned words into action, and we need to make sure that we recognize we can't trust anything they say when we look at what they do.
Okay, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to join in the conversation, we've been going, free. We've been going different wild issues. So basically, whatever you want to talk about on this, you can call 508.
1 minute.
508-871 after the next break. 508-871-7000. You are listening to Radio Central AM 830 WCRN. I'm Tom Donelson. I am filling in for the Joe Mangiacotti show. And for my good friend Joe Mangiacotti, I should also point out both of us worked at the Frontiers of Freedom as senior fellows, in addition to everything else that we do for the rest of our lives. So again, 508-871-7000. We got one more segment with Steve Gill left. You can feel free to give a call, any subject matter you want. And I'm Tom Donelson. I'm filling in for the great common sense conservative Joe Mangiacotti. WCRN 830 AM on your listening dial, Boston 50,000 watts radio station.
If you're as passionate about healthy eating as I am, you'll love New Kitchen. New Kitchen is a culinary gem for health-conscious food enthusiasts. They are committed to using the freshest ingredients from start to finish. Their ethically sourced organic coffee not only satisfies your taste buds, but also supports sustainability. Because New Kitchen uses fresh, local produce, there is nature's goodness in every bite. New Kitchen's refreshing cold-pressed juices, smoothies, and acai bowls are packed with vitamins and nutrients to keep you at your best. They're a rejuvenating experience. Find New Kitchen at 3 convenient locations in Worcester, Somerville, and Newburyport. Visit their website at thenewkitchen.com to explore their menu and place your order online. That's spelled N-U, not N-E-W. New Kitchen, where the passion for health meets the art of cuisine. Eat clean, drink naked.
1 minute.
Have you noticed past the age of 30, your energy level, mood, skin, and body has changed, and maybe not for the better? It may have to do with DHEA levels. DHEA is an important building block for more than 50 different hormones, and the body naturally produces DHEA. We make the most DHEA in our prime between the ages of 18 to 25. DHEA levels decline each year in men and women after about age 30. Research has established that maintaining healthy DHEA levels may help us feel more energetic, help reduce belly fat, and help us get a better night's sleep. Often, youthful levels of DHEA are tied to good health, while declining levels can contribute to an assortment of common health problems. Twist 25 is a high-quality DHEA supplement cream that absorbs easily into the skin, leaving no odor or oily residue. To learn more, visit twist25.com or call toll-free 888-489-4782. Look and feel your best with Twist 25, 888-489-4782.
Your mics are live.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, back to WCRN at 8:30 a.m. You can call in 508-871-7000. If I don't sound like Joe Mangiacotti, it's because I am Tom Donelson. I am filling in for the great Joe Mangiacotti, the common sense conservative, here on Boston's 8:30 a.m. on your listening dial. And you can call in to voice your opinion on anything we said here. 508-871-7000, 508-871-7000. Or if you just want to text, 617-297-8388. And now we're going back to Steve Gill. Okay, Steve, there's two subjects I want to kind of touch base with you. The first subject I want to talk about very briefly is China.
Yeah. Let me just say, I am thrilled to be in Boston, even virtually today. I'm in Nashville, Tennessee. Boston's one of my favorite cities. I love visiting there. I love eating there. I love touring there, particularly in the early fall, which is starting to shift into winter. But yeah, China, again, is another one where we were talking earlier about President Trump, I think getting, in many cases, really bad advice on how to deal with China. China has a great ability to support themselves internally. They control a vast majority of the natural resources that are needed to make chips and to make other things that we need. And the push and tug with a 500% tariff prospect that President Trump is tossing out there today. We were talking earlier about Russia, and I think we have tied Russia and China together by pushing Russia into the arms of China. That doesn't help us economically, politically, militarily, in any way in the world today. And I think that we're better off as a country if we find a way to resume relations with Russia rather than continue to push Russia and India into the waiting embrace of China. And unfortunately, that's what our policies are doing.
Yeah, that's a good point. Because here's the thing, in India, for example, we pretty much had a deal with Modi all set up, and now, with the Ukraine, threatening to, put a tariff on some of their buys of Russia. And I always thought myself, the best thing to have done is basically ignore what Modi is doing with the Russian, but go to him and say, you know what, we got better oil and better gas and better coal. Why don't you just buy from us and push the economic side of the equation? Because we need. Here's the thing. India is a natural ally of ours for two reasons. Number one, they're the second largest English-speaking country in the world. They do have a democratic. And number two, the Chinese are not necessarily their friends. And they know that. They got thousands of square miles they have lost to the Chinese on their border. And so it makes a lot of sense there as well. I guess the question is this: how do you begin the process of decoupling some of these areas from China so we're less dependent upon China? Your thoughts?
Well, I think President Trump, on one hand, is doing the right thing by trying to bring manufacturing and development back to the U.S. I teach international business at Belmont University as an adjunct faculty member here, and that's a big focus I talk about with my class. that what you've seen with Russia, again, in the last 10 years, they have moved to be able to produce anything and everything they need internally. They're a vast country. They have the resources. They have the oil. They have the energy resources, the natural resources. And they have now become more self-reliant and independent. China is moving rapidly in that direction. India is trying to figure out how to do that. We need to do the same thing. We need to be able to make and create anything and everything we need here, independent of what happens in the world. And that doesn't mean we cut ourselves off from the world, but when things go south, if we have that ability to get everything we want, we can be a little bit more leveraged in dealing with other countries. I mean, a lot of these countries are saying, wait a minute, you're castigating us for buying oil from Russia, but you buy uranium from Russia because you don't produce it. You're buying these natural resources from China, not only because you need them, but because you can't process them. We actually, Tom, buy our space rocket engines from a place in Russia called Samara because we don't make those. We can't, on one hand, slap India and others around when we're buying stuff from Russia and from China that we desperately have to have while calling them.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to follow up on that point because you take the rare minerals. There's something like about 35 to 50 identified in the United States. And reality is this: we have the ability to basically mine many of these here in the United States, but we don't. And it sounds like, I mean, it's, I had a conversation.
Them.
Yeah.
It's kind of like we have unlimited oil resources. We haven't built a new oil refinery, gasoline refinery in decades because the environmentalists won't let us do that. So, okay, let's drill, baby, drill. But what are we going to do with it? I mean, it's going to come up like a bubbling crude from the Beverly Hillbillies, but you got to turn that crude into something. And we don't have the capacity to do that as efficiently, as economically, and as environmentally sound as we could if we would build new, efficient, modern refineries.
I agree with you, but again, it comes down to the will and it comes down to an electoral process because once you have the will, we can do it. If we have the will to mine, we will do it. We have the will. We have uranium here in the United States. If we choose to mine it, we can do it. As far as oil goes, the one thing I would say that Trump's got right is on the energy side of the equation, basically saying, drill baby drill, frack baby frack, and dig baby dig, and nuke baby nuke. And those are the things that need to be done because the country that has the least expensive energy source is a country that's going to have some advantages. And we certainly would have those. Now I'm going to go switch to something very quickly. You mentioned this a while. You mentioned this off air, and the question is, what's the future of the MAGA movement after Donald Trump? What's your thoughts?
Man, I think we have real issues of J.D. Vance. I think Marco Rubio. I think Ron DeSantis. We have an amazing bench moving forward. But Trump is a once in a millennia politician. This is the guy who got in a pissing contest with the Pope, and the Pope apologized. This guy has defied gravity time and time again politically, and is capable and has been capable of doing things that were thought, couldn't happen, like peace in the Middle East, like, resolving conflicts all over the world, like restoring an economy that the Democrats had destroyed. So how do we follow up on that? Is there anybody, can J.D. Vance keep MAGA together? Can a MAGA duo of J.D. Vance and anybody else we have as a second seat, including Marco Rubio, does that hold the MAGA coalition together? And I'm not sure it does. And I think that's the scary thing moving forward.
Well, here's the other problem I have too, is because I've noticed, I've had this conversation with others, is that there is I've always, the point I've always made in my books, populism that's anchored by conservatism will be good for America. Populism minus the anchor goes left. And you see that with Tucker Carlson. In fact, I'm disappointed in Tucker because I think he's crossed a few lines into the anti-Semitism side of the equation. But he's a guy who's moved. I mean, I can remember in 2018, he did an interview. He was a speaker at the Center for American Experiment, John Hinteracker's group. And he basically said then that capitalism failed. And that's the biggest problem you're running. If you go look at Le Pen, there are aspects of Le Pen economics that, quite frankly, is closer to the left than to the right. And so there has to be, and that's the one thing Trump has done. He's anchored the populism
Correct.
to conservatism. I mean, in many ways, he's much like
And
Reagan.
to faith. I mean, again, that's what Charlie Kirk did. It was conservatism. It was faith. It was conversation, not confrontation. Man, I agree with you 100%. And keep in mind, and, I'm a history guy, so another reason I love Boston. Our founders had seen the French Revolution degrade into the guillotine and rabble on the street. They were terrified of the mob, which is why they set up a republic rather than a pure democracy. They wanted to have that ability to think before you act, because they were not populist in the pure sense of, we'll just let the mob control things, because they had seen what happened in other countries. So I think what President Trump has done, as you point out, is blend not only that conservatism, but also with rational logic and kind of the instincts that our founders brought to bear that make them unique.
By the way, ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to WCRN 830 AM in your listening dial. I'm Tom Donelson, and I am substituting for the great Joe Mangiacotti. And so 508-871-7000. We're getting close to wrapping this thing up. But if you think you can get one quick call at 508-877-7000, this will be your chance. Now let's go back to the point that's okay, Steve. I'm I'm agreeing with you in the sense that what happened to Mega. I've always have liked JD Vance. I'm totally surprised that Marco Rubio and how he's come forward. I mean, he's come a long way from 2016, and others as well. And I just think that, I mean, it's going to be a tight ship, but I think this is where it comes into that. What Trump has done, what Reagan did, was combine the populism with conservative ideals. I think that's what you're trying to see with the Reform Party in Great Britain. And I think it's going to be kind of an interesting experiment, because my danger is very simple. I mean, you can see this with Marjorie Taylor Greene right now. She's been shifting a little bit to the left on some of these economic issues. And again, that's a lack of a conservative anchor that she has.
Have that core. You got to have that core, and
you got to have that conservative core, or it's national. It's faith. It's market economy to allow people to be the best they can be. There's this aspect of some local governance to be able to control your own educational system. Maybe keep the guys out of the women's locker room. Things, common sense things that. Things actually here on this network and
30 seconds
on this particular program, WCRN 830 AM, and you're listening down with the Joe Mangiacotti Show. Okay, Steve, I want to thank you very much for being on the show. And we got just a few seconds left, so I just wanted to say thank you, Joe, for allowing me to be your sub-host today. Remember, it's WCRN 830 AM on your listening dial. The great Joe Mangiacotti Show. Joe will be back.
Wrap it up.
Be back very shortly. Next time around, you'll be listening to Joe himself. Thank you, Joe. We'll see you later. Goodbye, people.
Thanks, guys.
For today's podcast. All right.